Ah, France. Some might say is the heart of Europe. Without a doubt, the most romantic country in the world. Why, you ask? Oh, what a silly question. From sipping a glass of the best wine in the world to a sun-soaked trip to the south of France, romance is all around us. And of course, we cannot forget Paris, the most enchanting cafes, seductive locations, enthralling views, the most absolute of absolute monarchs that... Wait, what? Yeah, you heard that right. Louis XIV, our eventual star, had just about as close to absolute power as anyone has ever had. Previously, we explored the origins of absolutism in Europe, and today we're going to hone in on what is probably the premier example. That's right, we're headed to romantic and tyrannical France. Before we go any further, make sure that you've got your PDF printed and ready to go. In the preview activity, I want you to jot down a few things that you remember about absolutism from our previous lesson. When you've done that, we're ready to go. Our essential questions today are: what key factors in France led to the rise of absolutism? How did Louis XIV seize total control? And what consequences can we see on the horizon for France? I'm going to start by introducing you to a new word, and that word is fiasco. A fiasco is a complete failure which happens in a ludicrous or humiliating way. It's a great word, right? And it's a pretty good descriptor for France just before the rise of Louis XIV. Why? Well, we've got 4 factors. You can see them here. Before we learn about them, pause here, head to your PDF, and guess what each means. Now, while you may not have the exact same language as I do, follow along and compare what you wrote down as we go. Another good word here to bone up your vocabulary: feckless. It means lacking in strength or character and generally irresponsible. Most nobility, or generational title-based leadership, is passed down from father to son. What do you inherit from your parents when you become a baron, count, duke, or king? In France, it could be land, money, towns, and the like. They did not usually inherit good leadership skills. In fact, most nobility did not concern themselves with really anything, counting on the French peasantry to take care of things and spending vast sums of money that no one really had. This attitude and idea was driven from the top by the sons of King Henry II, but most importantly by their mother, Italian powerhouse Catherine de' Medici. Catherine was a daughter of the Medicis, a powerful, wealthy, and very Catholic ruling family of Florence, Urbino, and Tuscany, a region of northern Italy. This family was known for its adept and ruthless political dealings with Europe. Even though this period was continually racked by rebellions and revolutions, Catherine managed to keep a hold on power. What she couldn't keep a hold on, however, was the continuous strife between Catholic nobility and Huguenot or French Protestant nobility. From 1560 to 1600, the French wars of religion raged between the Catholics and Protestants, with Catherine pulling some of the strings. The event which contributed the most to the breaking of Protestant power, the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre, was a series of targeted assassinations of Protestant leaders in Paris, along with Catholic mobs terrorizing the entire nation, all drawing praise from the Pope, happy to rid the country of Protestant influence. Current casualty estimates of these wars range from 2 to 4 million, and the damage done to the French economy caused an even further decline in French power throughout Europe. Head back to your lesson guide and jot a couple of things down under the What Did You Learn section under Feckless Nobility. Speaking of the Church, the wake of the Protestant Reformation, a denial of Catholic doctrine and church authority, caused Europe to quickly fracture. By the end of the 16th century, Europe was split between Protestant and Catholic states. To have a cardinal as a high court official was nothing new, but the 2 cardinals of the French court at this time were cut above when it came to power and control. Armand Jean Duplessis, better known as Cardinal Richelieu, came to power as chief minister to Louis XIII in 1624 and laid the foundations of absolutism for future kings. Richelieu knew there were too many French Protestants in Catholic France to get rid of, so he allowed them to worship, but they couldn't live in any town with walls, castles, or fortifications, just in case they got the idea to resist the Catholic crown. In addition, Richelieu's distrust of the nobles led him to create a system of professional civil servants called the intendants, which stripped most administrative control from the nobility. His plan to stop adversaries from being able to revolt and hire workers who actually care about their jobs makes sense, right? However, the other thing that Richelieu did was to involve France in a horrible religious conflict later called the 30 Years' War. We'll touch more on this later, but for now, know that it was hugely unpopular, expensive, and didn't gain much for the common people of France. When Cardinal Jules Mazarin took over as chief minister for Richelieu, he basically put a couple of Richelieu's former policies on steroids. Richelieu and Mazarin were strong believers in the idea that the Catholic Church was beholden only to God, represented on earth by the Pope. As a result, they believed that the church institutions of France and the churchmen themselves should not pay any taxes to the crown. This meant that the nobility and peasantry were on the hook for footing the bill of France's major economic debt. This sat well with practically no one, and so it's probably not a huge surprise that there was an attempted assassination on Mazarin along with a nobles' rebellion from 1648 to 1653. Now here's a kicker in the story. Mazarin was chief minister for the very young, he was in his teens at the time, King Louis XIV, the guy mentioned at the beginning of our tale. During this nobles' rebellion, several attempts were made on young Louis's life. The rebellion was ultimately put down harshly, but it created even more distrust among the nobles and of the nobles. Head back to your lesson guide and jot a couple of things down under the What Did You Learn section under the power of the church.
Now wait just a doggone minute.
Now you may be thinking, why on earth is anyone listening to these out-of-touch people? I wouldn't give them the time of day.
Okay, whatever.
Others in Europe slowly began to think the same way. They began to ask a series of important questions. Why exactly are we fighting wars for the Catholic or Protestant belief system? No, really, why are we doing this again? What gives noble people the right to tell us what to do? Are we really sure that God put these people in charge? And how do we know what we're being told by these people isn't just a play for them to stay in power? And it goes on. Basically, people started questioning this centuries-old order of the church, the king, the nobles, and everybody else. This movement became known as the Enlightenment. Head back to your lesson guide and jot a couple of things down under the What Did You Learn section under Skepticism. The peasantry made up almost 90% of France. By the end of the 17th century, their tax burden increased by 1,000%. Keep in mind the job and life title of peasant doesn't usually come with pay raises. On top of increased taxes, these people had been through wars, famine, and bad harvests, all while watching the constant cycle of fighting and destroying what little they had over and over again, just to be told that it was what God wanted, while all they wanted was for someone to please make it stop. Head back to your lesson guide and jot a couple of things down under the What Did You Learn section under the people underfoot. When Louis took power by himself at 22, what he wanted could be summed up in one word: control. Louis doubled down on the professional civil servants, expanding the intendant's power. Additionally, he completely cut most nobles from councils, thus leaving them out of decision-making altogether. Louis's economic policies promoted mercantilism, a strict control of trade that ensured a continuous flow of wealth to the French crown. And he repealed the Edict of Nantes, which had granted toleration of Protestants within France, driving them out of France, which hurt the French economy and the labor force. Head back to your lesson guide and answer the following question. Why do you think Louis repealed this Edict of Nantes even though it seemingly hurt French prosperity? Remember what Louis wanted when he took the throne. So now try to think like a historian. Look at the cause and effect and seek to understand all of these different perspectives. We have corrupt rule by Catherine, her sons, and the French nobility. We have Catholic cardinals pushing for control, involving France in holy wars and sidelining that corrupt nobility. We have new ideas about people and their place in the world on the horizon with the Enlightenment, and we have an exhausted, overtaxed, and overworked peasantry. Enter Louis, a man with a plan who surrounded himself with smart people and cut out all of the nobles, the Protestants, and the professional middlemen from trading. Go to your lesson guide and hypothesize about what's next for France, keeping these questions in mind. We'll be heading back to France to focus on the fascinating character and times of Louis XIV in another lesson. Check out the extension activity to learn a little bit more about the Medicis and trade because history is everywhere.
Hey, hey.